People assume I confessed because guilt finally broke me down, but that's not what happened at all. I told Alex I thought about James while we were having sex because I wanted him to hurt, not in some dramatic way, just enough to justify the distance I'd already created. The moment those words left my mouth, I watched his expression shift from desire to something like contamination, and I knew I couldn't take it back. What nobody gets is that Alex was already slipping away. His work had consumed him, our conversations had become transactional, and I'd found myself constructing elaborate daydreams about leaving. I needed him to see me as damaged goods, someone who couldn't be saved, so his inevitable departure would feel like mercy rather than abandonment. What I've never admitted is that those thoughts about James weren't random memories. They were deliberate weapons I'd been sharpening for weeks. Here's the part that changes everything. James had been texting me for months. Not harmless, how you doing messages, but late-night confessions about how he'd never stopped loving me. I'd been deleting them, of course, believing that erasing the evidence was the same as innocence. The night I told Alex, I just received a photo from James that made my heart stop, a picture of us from 5 years ago, taken in the apartment where Alex and I now lived. I'd saved it to a hidden folder on my phone, thinking I'd eventually delete that too. When Alex asked what was wrong after we finished, I gave him the smallest version of the truth, the one that would make me look broken instead of calculating. 2 months before that confession, Alex and I had moved into our Brooklyn walk-up, the one with the crooked floors and the fire escape that rattled during storms. I'd convinced myself this was the fresh start we needed, that unpacking boxes together would somehow erase the growing silence between us. James had been out of my life for 3 years at that point, or so I'd told everyone. The truth was messier. I'd blocked his number after our breakup but never deleted the contact, and I checked his Instagram stories through a burner account I'd created during our final fight. I told myself this was normal, that everyone had digital ghosts they couldn't quite exorcise. When Alex suggested painting the bedroom gray, I agreed because it was the same shade James had wanted in our hypothetical future house, and some pathetic part of me needed that continuity. My first lie came 3 weeks after we signed the lease. James texted from a new number, "I keep dreaming about your laugh." I didn't respond, but I didn't block him either. Instead, I created a system I'd read his messages while Alex showered, then delete the thread before he returned. I told myself this was self-control, that I was managing a problem rather than feeding it. When Alex asked why I seemed distracted during dinner, I blamed work stress, the convenient scapegoat that required no proof. I didn't notice how my voice sounded hollow even to my own ears. A week before the confession, James sent a text at 2 a.m., "I'm in the city. I could be outside your door in 20 minutes. My hands shook as I deleted it, but not fast enough. Alex stirred in his sleep and mumbled something about coming to bed. I spent the rest of that night awake, staring at the ceiling, constructing scenarios where I answered James, where I didn't, where I told Alex everything. By morning, I'd convinced myself that silence was the same as loyalty, even though my body hummed with what I'd almost done. The day I finally told Alex, I'd made 3 questionable decisions before noon. I'd saved James's photo to that hidden folder. I'd lied about running into an old friend at the coffee shop when Alex called to ask what I wanted for lunch. I'd spent 40 minutes scrolling through James's Facebook photos from the past 3 years, nodding every woman who appeared in more than 3 shots with him. When Alex came home smelling like the rain and cheap office coffee, I initiated sex with a desperation I'd never felt before. Not because I wanted him, but because I wanted to prove I could still choose him. But somewhere between his hands on my waist and his breath in my ear, James's face surfaced in my mind, not as a memory, but as an intrusion I'd invited. I confessed not because I felt guilty, but because I'd already failed the test I'd set for myself. Alex's face after I spoke went through stages: confusion, hurt, then a stone-cold neutrality that terrified me more than anger would have. He pulled away physically first, his body retreating to the edge of the mattress. Then he asked the question I'd been dreading, "What else haven't you told me?" I gave him the carefully curated version, just the thought, just the one time, just a momentary lapse. I made myself sound fragile instead of duplicitous. He left the room, and I heard the shower turn on, the water running for 45 minutes while I sat in our bed, realizing I'd traded one prison for another. What I didn't tell him was that James and I had met for lunch 2 months prior. I'd lied about a dentist appointment, wearing the red dress Alex hated because it was too flashy, but that James had bought me for our anniversary. We'd sat at a corner table in a restaurant where nobody knew us, and James had reached across the table to touch my hand. I'd let him. We talked about everything except the fact that I was living with someone else now. When I came home that afternoon, Alex had made dinner, and I'd kissed him with the same mouth that had just promised James I missed him. Our friends started noticing the week after my confession. Sarah invited us to dinner and watched Alex flinch when I reached for his hand. Mark asked if everything was okay, his eyes darting between us like he was watching a tennis match where the ball might explode. I performed happiness in public, laughing too loudly at jokes, posting smiling photos on Instagram with captions about blessed and couple goals. In private, Alex stopped sleeping in our bed, moving to the couch with the excuse that he needed space to think. I lay awake listening to him breathe through the thin apartment walls, wondering if he could hear me crying. My mother called on a Tuesday, her voice bright with the kind of optimism that only works when you're hundreds of miles away. She asked about Alex, and I told her he was fine, we were fine, everything was fine. She mentioned she'd seen James's mother at the grocery store, and I felt my blood turn to ice. She said he's been doing so well, my mom continued, unaware she was dropping a grenade into my carefully constructed denial. Got a promotion, thinking about moving back east. I ended the call quickly, then vomited in the bathroom sink, the bile tasting like all the lies I'd swallowed whole. The breaking point came when Alex found James's number in my call log. I'd deleted the texts, but I'd made one call, a moment of weakness at midnight when Alex was at a work event, when I'd been 3 glasses of wine deep and feeling sorry for myself. I'd let it ring twice, then hung up, but the record remained. Alex didn't yell when he confronted me. He just held out my phone, the screen frozen on that damning call history, and waited. My defensive instinct kicked in immediately. I was drunk, it was a mistake, it didn't mean anything. The same lies I'd been telling myself for months, now offered up as truth. What I couldn't admit was that James had moved into a sublet 3 blocks away. He'd texted me the address with a key emoji, and I'd saved it in my notes app under a fake name. I'd walked past the building twice, once stopping outside to look up at the windows, wondering which one was his. I hadn't gone inside, but I'd wanted to. That desire felt more damning than any action I might have taken. When Alex asked me what I was thinking about during those long silences, I'd lie about work stress or family problems, anything to avoid saying I was calculating the distance between our apartment and James's new place, measuring it in steps, in heartbeats, in betrayals. My support system began collapsing when Sarah called me out at brunch. I'd been complaining about Alex's emotional unavailability, painting myself as the patient partner trying to make things work. Sarah set down her mimosa, her expression sharp with disappointment. You told him you were thinking about your ex during sex, and you expect him to be emotionally available. What did you think would happen? Her words landed like punches, each one exposing the selfishness I'd disguised as vulnerability. I left the restaurant, my face burning with shame I'd refused to feel until someone else forced it on me. The worst decision I made, the one that still makes my stomach turn, was texting James from Alex's phone. Alex had fallen asleep on the couch, his phone charging on the kitchen counter, and I'd seen the notification text from Sarah, asking if he was okay. I'd picked up his phone, my thumb hovering over the screen, and instead of reading Sarah's concern, I'd opened a new message to the number I'd memorized from my own call log. I miss you, I typed, sending it before I could stop myself. Then I deleted the message, hoping Alex wouldn't notice the gap in his conversation list. It was a violation so profound that even I couldn't justify it, a line crossed that made everything else I'd done seem almost innocent in comparison. The discovery happened when Alex's phone buzzed with James's reply while Alex was in the shower. Meet me at the park tomorrow, 3 p.m. I stood in our kitchen, holding Alex's phone, watching as my 2 worlds collided in a text message that wasn't meant for me. Alex came out, saw my face, saw his phone in my hand, and understood everything without me saying a word. The fight that followed was quiet but devastating, each of us armed with truths we'd been stockpiling like weapons. He told me he'd been planning to propose. I told him I'd been planning to leave. Both statements were true enough to break us completely. What followed was a blur of escalating consequences. Alex moved out within a week, taking only his clothes and his computer, leaving behind the furniture we'd chosen together like abandoned artifacts from someone else's life. Our friends divided themselves, most siding with Alex because his pain was cleaner, easier to understand. I became the villain in a story I'd started but couldn't finish. At work, my performance review mentioned my lack of focus, the polite corporate way of saying I'd become someone who couldn't be trusted with even the smallest responsibilities. I started drinking alone, the bottle becoming my only confidant in a world where I'd burned every bridge that might have led me back to myself. The revelation I promised, the one that reframes everything, happened 3 weeks after Alex left. I was cleaning out the apartment, packing our shared history into boxes marked for donation, when I found a letter tucked behind the dresser. Alex's handwriting, dated from 6 months before my confession. I'm worried about us, it read. I know I've been distant, and I know you feel it. I'm working on getting a promotion so we can move somewhere better, somewhere we can start over. Please be patient with me. He'd never given it to me, probably waiting for the right moment that never came. I sat on the floor of our empty bedroom, holding proof that I'd destroyed something that was already trying to heal itself. What I realized in that moment, what I'm only now able to articulate, is that I'd been looking for an escape route from a relationship that wasn't failing, just difficult. I'd used James as a repository for all my fears about commitment, all my discomfort with stability, all my self-sabotaging impulses. The thoughts I'd confessed to Alex weren't accidents or intrusions, they were choices I'd made, again and again, until they became the only truth I knew how to tell. I'd wanted Alex to look at me differently because I couldn't stand the way he'd been looking at me before, with hope, with patience, with love I couldn't accept because I didn't believe I deserved it. I'm writing this now because James moved away last month. He got that promotion, moved back east, sent me a final text that read, I hope you find what you're looking for. I never responded, but I saved the message in the same hidden folder where I kept his photo, a digital graveyard for all the versions of myself I keep trying to bury. Alex is seeing someone new, someone my friends tell me is lovely and stable, words they use carefully around me now. I still walk past James's old building sometimes, not because I miss him, but because I need the reminder of how close I came to destroying everything for someone who was never coming back. The truth is, I wanted Alex to look at me differently that night because I couldn't stand seeing my own reflection in his eyes anymore. I was tired of being the person who had everything and still wanted to burn it down. My confession wasn't about James at all. It was about me, about my inability to sit with discomfort, about my need to create chaos so I wouldn't have to face the quiet work of staying. Alex's changed expression wasn't judgment, it was recognition. He finally saw me, the real me, and I couldn't live with that either. So here I am, telling this story because the alternative is silence, and I've learned that silence is just another word for the lies we tell ourselves when we think nobody's listening. I lost the person who loved me because I was too cowardly to admit I was scared of being loved. I chased a ghost because haunting myself felt easier than healing. And the cruelest irony, Alex would have forgiven me. He would have sat in that therapy office I never scheduled, would have listened to my fears without judgment, would have stayed. But I never gave him the chance. I gave him a version of the truth so small it might as well have been a lie, and now I live in the space between what I said and what I meant, which is where all self-destruction begins. Judge me if you want. God knows I've earned it. But understand this, the difference between a mistake and a choice is repetition. And I chose James, chose chaos, chose the narrative where I was broken beyond repair, until that story became the only one I knew how to tell. Alex looks at me differently now because he finally saw the truth. The tragedy is that I still can't.